gamers, welcome back to another episode of the Cuddlepunk Podcast. I'm your host, Veronica Vex. This is definitely the first time I'm doing this intro. With me today is one of my favorite people on the planet. You know her from the Escape from Vault Disney podcast with Tony Goldmark. You know her as the co-host of the Land Before Timeland podcast with Chris Nebergall. You know her from video essays on Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Anime bullshit. She is one of my just favorite people and one of my best friends in the world. Madeline Maye is here.
Aww.
Madeline, how you doing?
Hi, thank you. That was such a nice introduction.
Very nice introduction that I definitely only had to do one time.
They were all good, except for that one part in one of them.
This motherfucker gets on me so much for her name.
Oh, are you complaining about a trans person getting uppity about their name right now?
I'm trans. I can do it.
So much self-transphobia right now. We're all just internalizing it. I love
if there's
it
one thing
so much.
If there's one thing I'd count on you for, it's that this episode is going to be able to get TikTok and YouTube Shorts clipped out at the ass.
Yeah, this is going to be great.
This is going to be fantastic. Let's start off talking about... I want to start off...
Do your job, Veronica. Gosh, ask me a question.
I will fly to LA right now, motherfucker. I will steal someone's credit card and fly to LA.
I know you will. You've done that before.
Motherfucker. Anyway, the Fantastic Beasts video essay, easily the biggest thing that you've done on your channel so far. What was the inspiration for that essay, the worst line in cinema history? And like how have you felt about like the reaction to that episode?
Before that, my biggest video was this analysis on Hell of a Boss, which I was really worried that I was going to get like typecasted as like somebody who only just talked about Vivzy pop content, because a lot of my fans seem to be people that were just not fans of her work. And I was like, I really don't want to get stuck in this rut. So when I released the Fantastic Beasts and just general Harry Potter video, that made me feel really good because I got a bunch more people coming in and it became such a big success and made me think, okay, I can do other things. I'm not going to be stuck just doing Hell of a Boss videos for the rest of my life, because I really didn't want to do that.
Which you then proceeded to follow up by making a second Has Been Hotel video. No, fucking Hell of a Boss video.
Hell of a Boss. I mean, they're so similar.
It's the same show.
It's basically this. Don't tell the fans that, but it's the same show. Unless they like that, I don't know. It's really complicated. Yeah, that came about extremely organically. I know that's kind of a cliche to say, but it really is true this time. I watched the latest episode of the show, which is called Apology Tour, just out of like curiosity. I happened to click on it like right when it came out. Like when you go on YouTube, it says like how long the video's been out, and it said it's been out for like 20 minutes. I'm like, oh wow, I really caught this right on there. So I started watching it, and immediately like an analysis kind of came to my head. Like I was just kind of amazed by what I was seeing. Like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. And I was like, I have something to say about this. And instead of just like putting that in the back of my head for a future project, I guess I was just having like a good executive function day and was like, oh, what if I just made a video like right now? I've got nothing else to do today. So I wrote a script, I recorded it, and I edited all the footage together. And yeah, it took me about 8 to 10 hours, with breaks and things like that. And I was able to get it out before the video had been out for 24 hours. So that made me feel really, really good. That I honestly, like, that is more impressive to me than like whatever the fuck I said in the video. Was that I made it very quickly and efficiently. And I still think it looks professional, especially with how much time I had to make it, because I think it's like 13 minutes. So I guess on a technical aspect, of course I love whatever I say about it. I think the theory is interesting that I come up with, but I feel like I'm getting better at this, and that makes me feel happy.
You have always been I've always been a fan of yours since I saw you first show up in Tony's stuff, because of your like level of courage to stand up to really aggressive fan bases. The first time I ever saw you and was aware of you was in the one movie later on Avengers Endgame, where you are the only you knew I was gonna bring it up. You're the only...
I mean, yeah, it's
It's your star moment, baby. It's the
It's
moment that broke you.
it's so funny. Like I do forget that a lot of like my current kind of era of popularity comes from the work that I did with Tony Goldmark and Associates, which was a complete accident. Like basically Chris Nebergall and I's creative partner, we did the Land Before Timeland together also. Made this YouTube series called Remain Seated with Chris Nebergall, where he would talk about rides and he would go into like this theory and all this stuff. And because of that, we got the attention of some of Tony's friends, like David Gansel. And like from there, we ended up meeting with Tony. And one day he was just like, "Hey, I do these one movie laters. Do you want to be on it?" And it was like in Burbank. It was close to us. So it's like, yeah, why don't we do it? And I was nice enough to be invited also, even though like clearly Chris was the main person because he was I wasn't in Remain Seated. I was editing it behind the scenes, but I kind of got invited also, which was nice of them. And we watched the movie. This is Avengers Infinity War, the one before Endgame.
This is the one where everyone dies at the end.
The
and
one
I
where
remember
everyone dies. Yeah.
watching that like as soon as it came out and seeing everybody fawning over the movie and you standing up, that one juror raising your hand for not guilty and just being like, no, this movie is actually trash. And
this was my 12 Angry Men moment.
Precisely. That bravery struck me instantly. I'm like, yo, I've never seen anybody go like this hard against something in one of these videos that everybody seems to love that much.
So that also is an interesting story because when we went to see the movie, we left the theater and I noticed that like every single one of the people we saw it with were like really, really excited and really pumped. And I could tell like they really liked the movie. And I did not. I thought it was quite bad. And so I went over to Chris and said, "Hey, like this is, our first kind of experience with like a Tony thing. And I know like, you're a big fan of him. Like I can just lie and say I like the movie. Like I don't want to get us in trouble or anything. I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't want to get like not invited back." And Chris said, "Oh, I don't care. Just say whatever the hell you want." Because he was like indifferent. He kind of didn't like it that much either. And so, yeah, I'm just sitting there like waiting to be allowed to speak.
Waiting to be allowed to speak is a constant thing on any Tony Goldmark project.
Usually when I'm the guest and I'm talking, other people. I mean, I'm a gabber also for sure. Like I talk a lot as people familiar with my content know. But yeah, I was just like hearing everyone say all of these amazing things, and then finally it goes to me and I say, I feel like we saw a different movie. This is one of the worst things I've ever seen. And yeah, that became my thing that people recognize me for. Like, I remember when that video came out, there were like a couple of comments that are saying like that Madeline really, really brought the show down. You shouldn't invite her back anymore.
Well, look who that worked out. You've been on what, 12 episodes of EFVD at this point?
Yeah, that was so weird to me because like I was just saying what I thought, and it became one of those things that like everybody brought back to me, but it's like I wasn't like trying to be like brave or anything. Like it's what I thought. I don't do well when I have to like not act the way I want or like say the things that I want to say. Like I feel so much more comfortable when I'm allowed to like give my opinion on things. So that was a nice moment because I thought like I was never going to get invited, but then we end up getting invited back to other things. I started to get put onto movies that they knew were going to be bad because I guess they thought I was like this hater girl or something. It's like, oh yeah, let's get her on all this stuff. So I did like the Wonder Park was another one that I was on. And it's like everybody kind of knew Wonder Park was going to be bad, which is, I think, why I don't know Tony's mind. Yeah, around that time, I started to get this reputation as a hater, which really honestly upset me because, like, I don't think of myself as a hater. Like, I just really, really like media a lot, and I'm passionate. So like, if I don't like something, it's like because I'm very passionate about the things I watch, and so when I don't like something, I also don't like it passionately. Like that's part of kind of what I think is real to me. Is real love is when you also acknowledge that the things you love can be bad and awful. I think that's part of like really loving something. And I try to be that with the stuff I watch. If I watch something that's bad, I don't pretend like it's good, or I don't like try to trick myself in my brain into being good because maybe I liked an earlier one in the franchise or whatever the thing is.
Like
I
even the one, even
Yeah.
like my favorite episode of the show, other than your guest choice one, which is my favorite episode of Escape from Walt Disney, but you knew that already.
Aw,
Um,
thank you. I really like doing that
my
one.
favorite
Yeah.
episode is the one that you and Chris and Dave and Tony did on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and you guys are glazing that movie, which is fair because it's a fantastic film, but you
Yeah.
also make sure to talk about the parts of the movie like the treatment of the indigenous people, or
Yeah.
way certain characters were rewritten to seem either more appealing or
Yeah.
less appealing. Like you are sure to bring up those things.
Yeah, that's important. I don't know if it's like if it's a neurodivergent tick or something, but like I have to say everything I think about something, or I feel like I'm going to explode sometimes. I don't know, maybe that's a spectrum trait or something, cuz like I'll say something, oh, that's nice, but then like back of my head is like, but you also need to be completely clear about everything that you say and think. So you also have to say the things that you don't like about this, or your brain's going to explode.
A trans
So
woman
that
having a fear of being misinterpreted?
Oh my god,
I've never heard of such a thing.
that's an old fear for me. Oh my god, that goes back to like being a baby. Oh my
Same.
god. It's so crazy, but yeah, that was really fun. I like talking about stuff that I like as well. I don't know, I just don't get on either. Most of the things I watch are like whatever. I think most stuff is just whatever. Sometimes I'll watch something that's really, really good and I get really into it. Like another one I liked was the Muppets Haunted Mansion, which was one of my favorite to be on because I really liked it. I was with a bunch of enthusiastic people, and like that's what like kind of upsets me about like this hater which I still sometimes get because
It
like
doesn't make any sense to me,
it
and I
doesn't.
try to
I
like call it out whenever it happens.
I think it's because I hated something that somebody liked. I just became a hater to that person. Like,
Do you want to
the
get into the Big E? Do you want to get into that big movie?
I mean, I took
And
the Big E. I took my shot earlier this week, so I'm good on that. But we can talk about Encanto as well.
I haven't seen the movie, so I have no bearing on whether or not it's like any opinion on it. I just think that
That's
the way
great.
that people reacted to your opinion on it was fucking ridiculous.
I know Chris hates it. Chris also hates. He saw it kind of recently, and he was like, "Oh, that was the worst thing I've ever seen." So yeah, I didn't like Encanto. Um, I knew going in, like when that got picked by the randomizer, I knew that I was going to be the one person in the room because I had already seen the movie before and didn't like it, and I knew I was with people that were really passionate about it. And yeah, I got in not necessarily trouble, but people did get like really angry to me, or really angry at me about what I said, even though like I felt like I backed up what I said with like, my experiences and my thoughts and opinions, and people were just like, you are actually have done a wrong and you need to apologize. It's like I just told you what I thought about a movie. That's not a right or wrong thing. But yeah, they were very mad. I think a lot of people just love the movie, and I respect that they love the movie. I just thought it was really bad and also kind of toxic in certain places.
Let's talk about something that you liked a bit more. One of my favorite videos of yours is it's a very short video essay that you made about one scene from Paranoia Agent. I am not much of an anime person, but all of what's that dude's name? Cone, right?
Satoshi Kon, yeah.
Satoshi Kon, everything that he made that I have seen, I have adored. I have not seen Paranoia Agent yet, but your video fully made me want to watch Paranoia Agent specifically
Mhm.
because of your analysis of that one scene. Was there a point ever where you were like, okay, I want to talk about like the full movie, or was it always just like, okay, that's one scene is the thing that I want to really focus on?
I would like to eventually talk about the full show of Paranoid Agent. It is my favorite anime of all time. I would even go so far to say it's the best anime of all time. It's basically that or Evangelion, I think, are the two that I would say are the best. Honestly, Paranoid Agent was like the undefeated until I did finally see Evangelion, and that was like, okay, this is like pretty close. But no, I think Paranoid is amazing. And that episode specifically that I talk about, and I will stand by this, I would say that is the single best episode of an anime that I've ever seen. That episode 2 of Paranoid Agent, like, is so imprinted into my head because I think it's just such a brilliant setup. Like, it's such a brilliant self-contained story that has all of these really interesting ideas, and how it's like shot and framed I found like so fascinating. And that scene in particular is something I've been wanting to talk about for a number of years because it always like I like seeing stuff in movies that like you don't like consider. I like being surprised. I like to see something in a cartoon or a movie or a TV or whatever. It's like, oh, I never would have thought of that. Or oh, that's an interesting way of doing it. So like with that scene, I love that they kind of set up like you can watch the video to kind of see, but basically what I say is that they really drag out this moment of the boy who's kind of an asshole in the show being revealed to be abusive to another student. And I love how it's framed because like we as the audience know what's going to happen, but how it's presented is so like it's so like tense, and it's so like it takes its time, and it really like stretches the idea, like it stretches this moment up into like the very last point. Like the fact that the boy like sees the text message, we don't see the picture yet, we see him looking at the picture, and then from there we go to everyone in the class getting a text and knowing that that's the picture. Like we know all of these things, but we never like see it, which I think is so fascinating. Like we don't even need to see the actual picture, even though we do end up seeing the picture. But it's like I it shows like a trust in the intelligence of the audience. Like it shows like, wow, like I've done this, so you're invested in what's happening and you know exactly what's going on. And I can play that as a filmmaker and make that the best that I can make it. And Satoshi Kon is so brilliant at that. Like I believe he storyboarded that episode as well. He just is one of those guys. Like he just goes like storyboard by storyboard. Like he puts them. I was reading something about how he just puts them like together in a row, so he knows like, okay, here's the storyboard. The next one's going to be this. Like he said, he knows exactly like what he wants everything to do and be. And he has, I think, an Alan Moore level to detail and skill of presenting imagery, which is why he's my favorite animation director. And he left this world way too early. Like, oh my god.
That reminds me a lot of like Jeff Smith, the guy who wrote Bone. I remember reading that
Mhm.
he wrote and drew the final panel of Bone of the final issue before he worked
Mhm.
on anything else because he always wanted to know
Yeah.
exactly where it was going.
Yeah, I think stuff like that is interesting. I love hearing about the like artists like technique and like how they approach making their art because there's so many different ways to do it. Like I have my way that I make things that kind of
Well, let's
works
get
for
into
me.
that a little bit more.
Okay.
Like we both make music. We have both
Yeah.
talked about like our music making styles. For you, I remember it being a lot more like music first and then adding the lyrics later on. And you're very focused on like each individual bit of the song. Like you want each thing to really pop out. Like you don't want any spare moments or filler moments or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I write music or really write anything, I want it to be like a full piece. Like I'm thinking about like every element of what's going to happen. Um, music first was just honestly because like I felt more, I felt more optimistic about like my music playing at that time than my voice. I wasn't very confident in my voice when I was starting to write songs. So like I would write stuff that like, okay, I'm not the best singer, but like if I can make the guitar really good, maybe they won't notice that I'm not like the best singer. Yeah, I mean like sound
I mean,
and
you were doing like
melody.
cover stuff. I remember us talking like when I visited
Yeah,
LA, like
yeah.
you had like a whole set of like cover songs that you would do at open mics and everything.
Yeah, I used to just go to this bar like down the street and they had this open like seating, like outside seating area. And I would just play acoustic guitar there. And they would some reason let me do it. And I used to go there like every week and play guitar. And I just had this large repertoire of music. And that's really how I learned to write songs, was that I just learned like hundreds of songs on guitar. And that, I started to kind of put things together and go, oh, I can write a song because I've seen how it works so much. So I didn't go to like a school that teaches you how to write songs. I just kind of learned a bunch. And that was my school, I guess, is learning a bunch of songs on guitar.
Let's talk about Kessie for a moment, which comes from, it is my favorite song that you've ever made. It
Okay.
is inspired from the episode of The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh that you talked about in your Escape from Walt Disney guest choice episode.
Yes.
Talk about for a second, like I say condensed, it's you, a slightly condensed version of why that episode means so much to you. Because I want people to go listen to the
Yeah.
episode because it truly is one of my favorite podcast episodes, just period, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my favorite examples of somebody analyzing why a piece of media means so much to them personally. No like other thesis on anything, just why it applies to them. And the song that followed that you've been working on for a number of years now, like working out all
Yes.
the fine details of, it is so clear how much you thought you have put into not only the song but this piece of media in general.
Yeah, that episode of Winnie the Pooh, which is called Find Her, Keep Her, from the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, was such like an important moment for me as a kid. Like when I saw that, I don't know, it's some part of my brain, like even at a young age, I thought to myself, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And I've revisited the cartoon like every year. I rewatch it, and every time I rewatch it, I like it more and more and more. And I like to think, and I kind of say this in the podcast, I like to think that we all have something that is like beyond our favorite things. Like we have things that we say, oh, that's my favorite thing, that's my favorite whatever. But I also think we all have like a kind of art or something that goes beyond just a favorite thing to where it's almost like, if not religious, it kind of takes on a different form. Like something that's so like central, like a pillar of who you are, that it's like hard to think about it in normal ways. And Kessie in this episode, for me, is one of those things where it's like I don't really have an ability to look at it without just the context of it. I can't really look at it plainly. I can't look at it objectively, because I am so attached to this cartoon. It is to me like almost spiritual, which is kind of cliche to say, I know, but that is really like how I feel about it. Like
Cliches
it really
are
is.
cliches for a reason.
I guess it's very true, but it really is just like one of, if not the like most important thing I've ever like experienced in my life. And I do legitimately think it is one of the greatest, if not the greatest pieces of animation ever created. And that's entirely subjective, I know. But for me, it really is just, I think, just so beautiful and so incredible. Like every time I think of like how to make something that's like the best, or like thinking about like the best, like I kind of think about something like that. Like, how do I make something that's as amazing to me as this episode, or one of my other things that I kind of worship, like these things that are like define who I am, define my personality, and define how I see and create art.
That's completely beautiful. And it very much comes
Aw.
across in all of the songs, but especially the song Kessie. Like you've shown me like intermittent like clips and like different recordings of so many of the different songs that you've got, because you've got an EP coming out that you somehow recorded all in one day last night as we're recording this, you maniac.
I'm in my manic mode right now. I don't know what's going on. I'm creating a lot because I did the episode a couple days ago of the video essay, and then I said, well, it's because you said, hey, can I be on the show? And I was like, yeah. But I felt, because I remember a year ago or something, you said, oh, I'll put you on the show when you make an EP. So when you invited me on the show, it's like, oh, I should have an EP ready to talk about on the Cool Music Show. My friend does. Yeah. So I'm like, I'll just do it. Like, whatever, screw it. Who cares? Whatever. What happens, happens. I'll just do it. And I did. I have an EP coming out. It's an acoustic EP. It's just me with a guitar in front of a mic, one takes, or, it's a single take, no editing, nothing like that. Just very raw, as real as I can. It's called Proof of Concept because it really is as it really is as it says. I would like for these to be larger songs, and you can see some of my old live performances with my old band Inkblot to see some of these songs in a full band setting. But since that band doesn't exist anymore, this is my kind of reintroduction of these songs, some of which I've had for years and years, but I think still hold up and really want to get out there someday.
I'm very excited. I have been able to listen to a couple of the songs so far. I have not listened to the full EP, but I'm very, very excited about it. So much of the stuff is so influenced by just like acoustic guitar recorded straight into tape stuff. It's very Mountain Goats. It's also very Neutral Milk Hotel, who I know are a big influence for you.
Changed my life, honestly. Yeah.
That album changed, I think, everybody's lives who hear it so much. In the Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel. When we come back, we are going to be doing a ranking of every single song on the album In the Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel. But before that, during this break, you guys are going to be able to hear a very special sneak peek of the EP. Right now, I am going to play you Kessie from Proof of Concept by Madeline Maye. You guys are going to be able to hear it first. We will be right back with more of the Cuddlepunk Podcast. Enjoy this magical music.
Tomorrow you have got to go. All right. Night turned 2 days into weeks and you're hearing okay. See, why don't you leave me? Can't you see that I don't want you? I've broken my back. I just don't have the knack. Do you understand? Do you understand? 'Cause let's say you feel the way I feel. Say you feel the way I feel. You make it so hard. Don't you smile at me, or I'll start smiling too. We talk and we fight and we curse and it swears and it bumps and it bursts and it bursts and oh why did I take you, oh why did I bother? My heart filled with holes and my lungs filled with water, oh can't see. Why don't you need me? Can't you see? You belong here. Just stay and we'll go to that day in the snow. Do you understand? Do you understand? 'Cause let's say you feel the way I feel. Say you feel the way I feel. Say you feel the way I 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome back to the Cuddlepunk Podcast. I'm your host, Veronica Vex. What you just heard was Kessie off the EP Proof of Concept coming out this Friday by Miss Madeline Maye. Right now, what Madeline and I are about to do is we are going to rank every single song on In the Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel, everybody's favorite sad boy indie record that all the trans girlies love.
Yeah, the sad boy to happy girly album, let's say, right?
That is a pipeline for sure.
Yeah.
That is a pipeline for sure. We are going to be going through Madeline's list that she has prepared, her rankings that she's prepared. I will be chiming in with where I ranked those songs, but I want to make clear that this is Madeline's list that we are focusing on, and I will just be interjecting with silly commentary as I usually do with these kinds of ranking type things.
So first I want to say that Veronica is evil for making me have to choose between all of my favorite children, because this is a perfect album. This is such an important album to me personally. It has literally changed my life. I saw Neutral Milk Hotel do a reunion show in 2016 in Florida, or 2015, 2016. And I was so moved by it. I went to myself afterwards and was like, I hate Florida. I want to move back to California. So like on the drive home, I called my mom and said, hey, you said he had a job for me, right? And yeah, I scheduled going back home that same night. So this is a very important album for me by my favorite band of all time. I say all that because my number 11, there are 11 songs on In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, is extremely controversial, but I can't explain. I love every song on this album. They're all 10 out of 10 perfect songs. But the one that I would say is, to me, the least interesting, number 11, is In the Aeroplane Over the Sea.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I like the song a lot. But for me, it is also like kind of just a typical like doo-wop chord progression. The song itself, especially after the intro, which I'll get to later in the list, is like builds up this really interesting thing, and it kind of goes to a more traditional song, I would say. And again, not that that's bad. Like, I don't skip songs when I listen to In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, but like the title track, that's like the one that comes up to me with me. Like, I guess, gun to my head, I had to get rid of one, or there's one I like least of these perfect songs. I would have to say that one.
The title track is for sure. It is the type of song that a white boy will bring out an acoustic guitar at like a party or a campfire or something to play.
Absolutely. Yes. It's not.
I would still put it at number 3 because that's my bread and butter. But I totally get where you're going with this.
I think most people would rank it much higher, if not their favorite song on the album. But for me,
this is why I come to you, Madeline Maye. I always come to you for the hottest takes.
Yes, I can't get away from that. I try so hard, and I get so far, but in the end,
it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. Exactly.
Listen, hottie with the hot takes. That's all we're here for. That's what that's the thesis of this show.
But like every other song that's not instrumental, beautiful lyrics. That's one of my favorite parts about In the Aeroplane is the lyrics are some of the best of all time. If not the best lyrics of all time in any album ever, I would say. It's just because every song is so good. Like, I need to it's not like I'm saying I don't like the song In the Aeroplane Over the Sea. I just feel less strongly about it.
This album is too good to be. I really did fuck you with this, with making you rank this.
I did do it. I did manage to do it.
What's your number 10?
My number 10 is The Fool, the instrumental track, because of the two amazing instrumentals, I would put it second over the other instrumental on the album. And it's still like, I love everything about it. I love the horn section. That whole composition, I think, is so cool, and it fits at such a perfect moment in the album to kind of show this vibe and energy that the album presents. I like to think of the music in this album as like what the actual music would sound like in a steampunk universe. If we actually had like an actual steampunk universe, it wouldn't sound like steampunk giraffes or whatever, where it's just like an old song with like some robot sounds on it. I feel like if you were to take that process and like have a full steampunk, I feel like something like In the Aeroplane would come out. Like that kind of music that's here, I think would be more accurate to that time and that genre. And I think The Fool is a great example of that because it's got all the big horns. It sounds like it's coming from a different time, much like a lot of this album. I just think it's beautiful.
It's a great instrumental. It would probably be, I tend to put instrumentals, unless they're really impressive to me, pretty low on my list. I would say that 10 is probably about where I'd put The Fool as well.
Number 9 is the other instrumental, Untitled, which is just such a cool sound. Like it sounds like a circus falling apart or like a carnival in a microwave. And I think that's really awesome. And it's just such a fun, happy song while also being like an explosion of every emotion and piece of metal on a on anything ever. And I think it's really cool. I love the organ in it. I love just the whole sound. I think it's a really cool song.
The way that you describe that, I want to suggest to you and also suggest to the audience at home, there is a podcast that Night Vale Presents did, the people who make Welcome to Night Vale. They did a show in 2016, and it was written and created by Julian Coster of Neutral Milk Hotel. It's called The Orbiting Human Circus of the Air. And it's only 2 seasons. It's 24 episodes. I would truly recommend to everybody who is a fan of Neutral Milk Hotel to listen to this podcast. I think that if there was ever a world that was shaped by the music that Neutral Milk Hotel meant, it would be the world of Orbiting Human Circus of the Air.
Interesting. No, I will definitely look into that. My number 8 is, I think it's very underrated because it's only like a couple seconds. It's Communist Daughter. I really like this song a lot. I feel like it's not really talked about with regard to the rest of the album because it's only like, I think it's like less than a minute long, but I find it so crucial to the album that when I saw Neutral Milk Hotel live, they played every song for this album except Communist Daughter, and I was very sad. I'm like, oh, I wanted to hear Communist Daughter, even if it's only like a 45-second song. I love the lyrics. I love how tasteful he makes like the most pornographic imagery sound, like semen stains the mountaintops is just so beautiful to me.
And that's
even
the first
though
time the word semen's been said on my show somehow.
that is extremely surprising. You need to fix that.
I
for
just
your
did.
future
You just
episodes.
did.
Yeah. Yeah. More episodes should just have semen as a topic.
But no, I think that this song, I like the song a lot. It is the one time on the album where I think that there's a lot of less is more on this album. I think this is one of the time, maybe the only time in the record where it doesn't work for me, because I want more of this song. Like I want to hear more about what's going on here. And I think I appreciate that it was just meant to be like this 45-second thing, but I don't know. I want to live in the world of this song a little bit longer.
I think that's fair. To me, though, I really do think it's like the perfect length. Like, I feel like it gets out. It says what it needs to do. It says what it needs to say. And it's the perfect lead in to one of my favorite songs, which is going to come up a little later in the list. My numbers 7 through 4 could be switched around indefinitely. Number 7 is Two-Headed Boy Part 2.
The final track on the record.
The final track on the record. And I love it. This is a song that the more I listen to it, the more I like it. I think I was a bit more neutral to it. When I first heard the album, because like, oh, this is the ending. It's all kind of over. But the more I listen to the album, the more like this song like rises in my ranks. I think it's one that kind of creeps up on you a bit. For me, it's hard because it's part 2 to one of my favorite songs of all time, but like it really is beautiful by itself. Like Phoebe Bridgers is a cover of it that's so beautiful, and I highly recommend checking that out, because it really is just like one of those songs that's like when you kind of sit down with it, you realize, oh, there's like so much more going on here than I kind of gave it credit for the first time I listened to it. And it really is kind of the perfect closure of like everything that the album is about, not just the obvious Anne Frank metaphor that's the basis of the whole album, but just like this idea of like identity, this idea of like what it means to love, and like how love changes people, and how we are never one thing. We're always kind of multiple things going through space and time. And I just think it's a really perfect ending. Like, I think the last couple lines, especially of the song, I will feed you tomatoes in radio wire, but don't
hate her when she gets up to leave.
Yeah. Just, I cry just thinking about it. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
One of the things that I think I might get a little bit of heat for, particularly with you, but possibly with other people, I think that if you are going to find a platonic like a platonic mate for this album, it is Pinkerton. Because there are a lot of ways that you could read this album that are inherently incel-y, inherently nice guy-y, but the way that it is sold, that's the whole thing. That makes it so that it doesn't come off that way. I think it comes off much more sincere than the more negative ways that you could read it, give it credit for.
I mean, if you are to make that comparison, I would say that they're just polar opposites of each other.
They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Oh, God. I don't want to think of this as an incel album, but I see what you're saying. Like the whole
we'll get to my like more incel feelings on this album in the future. And I'm somebody who just came around on Pinkerton.
I can't say, like, I can't completely disagree with that analysis, because I do see what you're saying. Yeah, and I guess this Pinkerton's maybe more embarrassing about it, but you're right, there is a sophistication in the Aeroplane, while Pinkerton is just like... Next song, number 6, is Ghost.
Perfect song.
Perfect song. Not a whole lot to say about it. Just really fun, really cool. Love the concept of it. It's very high energy. There aren't too many high energy songs on the album, so it's nice to have them. Comes at the exact perfect time, which is after Oh Comely, which is so devastating. So it's nice to have something that kind of picks up and basically makes the momentum for the last third of the album.
It's such a well-balanced record. It every
it really
part
is.
of it, when you're down in those depths, it will always have something to like pick you back up afterwards.
It's under 40 minutes. It's really concise. There's no filler, you know, it's all like right there. It's exactly as long as it needs to be.
It truly feels like a concept album that was made in the LP era, where
Yes.
like you could not put something on a CD and it had to be under a certain amount of time to be able to fit on a vinyl record.
From what I understand about Jeff Mangum, his writing style was that he wrote very few songs, but he would like tinker with them for like years and years. Like he was one of these guys that like would write something and he would just kind of have it for a long time and just kind of keep messing around with it. So like when you go into the archives, there's not a whole lot of stuff that's not on the Neutral Milk Hotel albums, because he was just like, I have a song, I'm going to spend a lot of time getting it as good as I can get it, and then that's it. Which I think is really interesting. It's a really interesting way of approaching songwriting.
I agree, and I know
Veronica didn't find that. Veronica didn't.
No,
find
I
that
did. I was just I didn't have any I didn't have any commentary, because you're just right. Other than like the only commentary I could make is like, I know that's how you make your stuff, and I know that's why Jeff is such an inspiration to you.
I would
one of the
say,
reasons.
I don't know if I would say that's exactly my style. I basically write a bunch of things until I find like a sound or an idea that stands out. Like I like to write songs that have something about them that's like unique, whether it's like a hook or like a melody. I'm a big fan of hooks. I think especially in 2024 they're underrated. I like having something that kind of centers a song and is catchy. Like, oh, I remember that. Having something in a song where someone will go, oh, I remember that. V and I were talking about my song, the Fall Song. And I think of it that term, like the opening riff of that song, which you'll hear when the EP comes out, is an example of that. It's something that like immediately, like, oh, hey, here's something catchy. It leads to the rest of the song. Like I like stuff like that. I like stuff that catches your attention. Maybe it's because I've got ADHD and I get bored really easily. So I like to write songs that there's like always kind of something going on that like kind of keeps your interest. Because that's how I listen to music myself.
You guys aren't ready for this fucking EP. You guys are not ready.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm very nervous. I don't get to talk about my music a lot. So thank you, V, for having me on the show to talk about my music.
You know, I got you.
I know. Boo. Got you. We're in my top 5 now.
Top 5, baby.
Top five. Number 5 is King of Carrot Flowers Part 1. Great opening. I remember when I first listened to the album, I started out a little apprehensive because the opening riff is basically just Steve Miller's The Joker, like a little sped up. And like that was very, you know, it wasn't the most exciting opening, but then like once the lyrics started to come in,
I don't know if you could hear that scream that happened just there, but that was me being so upset about how right she is about the fact that it is just Joker by Steve Miller Band sped up.
It's also, it's a common like chord progression. Like a lot of songs do it, not just the Joker. But like I was wondering, like, he left. Do I have to just keep talking?
For those of you who are not watching the audio version of this, I got up as soon as she said that and walked away and did a scream, which is a bit that I do all the time, but doesn't necessarily work great in audio format.
But but for me, like once the lyrics kick in, the stuff about like stabbing dad's shoulder and like wanting to die, like that's what, okay, something interesting's happening now. Okay, this is not just the Steve Miller riff. There's some cool things. And then like the horns come in, the keyboard synthesizer stuff comes in. It all starts to make sense, which leads to my number 4 song, King of Carrot Flowers Part 2 and 3. Part 2 of the Part 2 and 3 is the moment when I fell in love with the album, when Jeff Mangum does the long, I love you, Jesus Christ. Like when he just enunciates that, he just says that Jesus Christ for like so long. That's when I realized, like, oh, this is really funny. This is really clever. I get what's happening. And that's when I was like, okay, now I want to listen to the rest of this album. Now I'm really, really into what's going on. And then it leads to that perfect funk punk section in Part 3, where it's like, okay, now this is everything I want. Like now I'm ready to listen to the whole album. I laughed out loud at the I Love You, Jesus Christ the first time I heard it. And I think it's such a perfect moment in the album.
King of Carrot Flowers Part 1 and then King of Carrot Flowers Part 2 and 3, they are to me what drew me into the record, because it's not just a record about like Anne Frank, which we'll get into. It's a record about divorce in a certain way, or at least how divorce affects people. And as somebody who, my parents are both still together and I have never experienced a divorce myself, for some reason I'm obsessed with songs and music about divorce. Like these two songs, Better Homes and Gardens by Taking Back Sunday, No Children by the Mountain Goats, Stay Together for the Kids by Blink-182. There's something about writing about from that topic and that point of view that just creates, I don't think there's anything that creates more heart-wrenching personal stuff for me, because I'm a very like romantic person. I take my personal romantic relationships very seriously, and I like breakups affect me a lot, and it is something that kind of power, that's kind of the stuff that like really makes me cry. Like with A Lot of Dispute, like those songs are much more about, like specifically on Wildlife, those songs are just about still like the saddest things you can talk about, just period, even excluding divorce, like just the saddest shit you can think about. And that's the stuff that I listen to when I just want to like really be in like upset and like angry about shit. But when I need something that's going to make me cry, I always put on like something about divorce. And I'm curious as to why that is. And it's something that I want to like figure out for myself a little bit.
I mean, that's interesting. I never thought of the divorce angle, but now I completely see it. Now that you've said it,
or at the very
like,
least, unhappy relationships. Like the parents in King of Carrot Flowers Part 1, there is not a sustainable good relationship. If they are not getting divorced, they absolutely should be.
No, absolutely, and I think that leads into like the idea of the two-headed boy, this idea of like things together that maybe is a little, maybe either shouldn't be together or there's some kind of anomaly there, which is maybe why the album is so popular among trans eggs, because like we also feel that separation of like one thing and another thing and being like, who am I? You know, like a lot of times I felt like the two-headed boy, you know, like I have these two things inside of me. Like, what does that mean? You know, so I think that same idea that makes people think of like divorce with the music also can make people think of like our own kind of disassociatedness when we're trying to figure out who we are as a person.
It's all about, I was talking about this with Ellie in my last episode of why we're into like Nine Inch Nails and Death Grips and stuff. And it's that feeling of like, just feeling of everybody watching you and making you feel like you don't belong and something is amiss. And I think that is something that this record gets across very easily, which can be translated into all of the feelings that we've been discussing so far.
Yes, absolutely. Now, my top three are interchangeable depending on my mood and day. If it's hot outside, if it's cold outside, these can switch around because
it's cold outside in Los Angeles, in fucking Burbank.
It's hot as hell right now in Burbank.
Exactly.
It's awful. But as of this exact second, these are my top three in an order. But again, the number one could easily change between any of these songs. And again, I imagine a world where Two-Headed Boy Part 2 rises even higher on my list, because that's one that just kind of keeps growing for me. My number three is Oh Comely. It's hard to describe how beautiful it is, because it's the simplest song in the world. It's, for 90% of it, just Jeff Mangum with an acoustic guitar and his perfect voice. One of my favorite voices in all of music, let alone alternative rock.
This is kind of the 2112 of this record. Like, it's the only song that like goes past 5 minutes. It is that big 8-minute centerpiece of the record.
Yeah, but it's also not like, it's not a prog song. No. It's a very simple folk song. Like, it basically is just 2 chords throughout the entire song, but it goes to all of these places, and just the lyrics are so beautiful. And according to legend, this might be apocryphal, but somebody told me that Jeff Mangum did all of this in one take, which is amazing if true, because it's so beautiful. I love his voice. When I heard his voice for the first time, I wanted to copy that voice. I wanted to mimic that voice. I wanted to incorporate something about his voice into my singing, because it was so raw. Like, to me, it sounded more beautiful than like the most technically proficient singers, the American Idol winners. You know, like the way he would scream, just like the emotion he was able to convey with his voice was just so like perfect. It was like second to none to me. Like it was,
I mean,
it sounded like,
that makes sense given your like
yeah,
taste in like the more emo side of things with like
yeah,
Titus Andronicus and Get Up Kids and Promise Ring. Like none of them have great voices, but they all
yeah.
have voices that demonstrate that raw emotion that I think is way more important for music like this.
I would say for me, like Rites of Spring, especially, like just how raw and like the way he sang was like, it was folky. It sounded like something you would hear in like an Irish band, but it was also like not at the same time. It was like taking like what if we took like a Bob Dylan like voice to like the ninth degree of power and emotion? Like it really is just so unspeakably beautiful to me in a way that I cry every time I hear it. My number 2 is Two-Headed Boy, which is
Really?
really hard for me to say. Yeah, extremely hard for me to say
Because that's where I would put my Two-Headed Boy at number 2 for me as well.
yeah. No, it was it was the first song I heard on the album where I'm like, this is amazing. I believe I had heard it somewhere in the past. Something about it was familiar to me. Maybe I heard it through somebody's car speaker a million years ago. But like the song itself was like, this is everything. I immediately learned it on guitar, and that became my acoustic song that I would play of the Neutral Milk Hotel, not in the Aeroplane. I would play Two-Headed Boy. And I just like, I wanted to sound like that. I wanted to get his voice. I wanted to sound, everything about what I wanted in music was in that song. And I love it. It's, you know, I know the lyrics. I can just, every time I think about it, every time I hear it on the radio or through my Spotify, I have to sing along to it. It's like impossible for me not to. But I think it was really a very egg song for me. You know, like I really related to this two-headed boy, like of having something else, of being two people, because I had who I was on the outside, but I knew there was something inside of me that I could not understand or conceptualize yet. And looking back, that was absolutely my feelings of being trans at a time where I knew that my mask was wrong. Finally, I knew that who I was presenting myself as was not who I was, but wasn't sure who I was, like beyond that. And a song like this came at a time where like I really needed to hear that. And it's one of my most beloved songs of all time. It's just beautiful. So I have listened to it 1,000+ times.
With that being your number 2, there's really nothing else to say except 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes. I chose this just because the whole band aspect, like Holland 1945 is maybe not the most surprising choice as a number 1 song on this album, but I do really think it is everything. It's the whole band, it's the whole sound, it's the perfect distillation of what like folk punk is. The lyrics are perfect. Every sound is incredible. Just beginning to end, it's like almost boring to say. It's a perfect song. Like what more can you say about Holland 1945 that hasn't already been said? Like it's everything. It's that world. It's whatever the world of that podcast you're talking about. It's to me that steampunk world. This is what they're listening to when they're doing anarcho-communist shit in the steampunk world. They're listening to this song. Like absolutely.
To be able to write a song about being in love / horny for Anne Frank, and to be able to pull that off, that is something that only the best songwriters can accomplish.
Yeah.
And it is another Pinkerton comparison for me, where I would compare this honestly a lot to Across the Sea or Pink Triangle, in that this person is clearly filled with so much self-loathing that the only person that they can imagine loving them or making it so they can love themselves is this historical girl who has been dead since 1945. That is so deeply depressing, but it's also something that like, pre-coming out, I remember hating myself that much. I remember being in those really dark places where you kind of have to choose whether or not you want to become an incel. Because there's a lot, I feel like for most trans girls, there are a lot of times where you have to choose not to be an incel. And I feel like that is
that's absolutely true. Yeah.
That is this point for this album. Like this feels like the part where like this could probably be the most despicable song on the record, like the most showing how loathsome Jeff Mangum can be, but that he pulls it off and he still makes you like, okay, this is the craziest shit I've ever heard, but I get it. I fully get it.
I completely disagree with that reading of the song. Honestly, like I do, like, obviously it is about Anne Frank, like much of the rest of the album. For me, I think it really is just like this idea of this place in time and like how tragic it was. Like, this is the end of the war. This is like Anne Frank dying, but it's like, why? Like, Anne Frank did not have to die. Like, as expanded on in Oh Comely, which is also about Anne Frank, he says the lines like, basically saying like, what if you had been alive? Like, you know, what if 50 years later, you know, like that didn't happen, that you could be preserved in a time machine. Like, it's basically like this whole world, this whole life of this girl was just gone because of something completely outside of her control. And I feel like the lyrics are bombastic, but they're talking about a very depressing time. It's talking about death. Like, the whole song is about people exploding and basically a blitzkrieg of bombs and explosions, you know? It opens with like, the only girl I ever loved was born with roses in her eyes, and then they buried her alive one week in 1945. Like, it's about just this tragedy. It's a bit of a wanting for Anne Frank, but it's also about the tragedy that someone like this died. The whole imagery is so tragic and so like awful, but it has this bombacity to it in a way that's almost ironic, kind of like how the Kinks would do with their songs. Trying to find any kind of celebration or happiness in anything. It's just, there's so much going on. There's so many emotions going on in this song, many contradicting each other. And I think that's what makes it beautiful. This whole album is about contradictory emotions and feelings. This idea of sex being both beautiful and disgusting and clinical, you know, describing the sex as like, I put, you know, my fingers through your spine to see how your muscles groove, like very, very strange ways of describing physical intimacy and sex. And I think that's what makes it so interesting, is this kind of dichotomy of like, it's not just this, it's also this, and kind of putting it all together.
If we hadn't been gotten you guys to listen to this album, if somehow you're watching this show and you have not heard In the Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel, if we haven't convinced you to listen to it yet, I don't know what will happen. But that is Madeline Maye's ranking of every song on In the Airplane Over the Sea. Thank you so much for killing all of your children for me. I really do appreciate it.
And yeah, you all should listen to it. You know, put the album on, start taking estrogen. It's going to change your life.
You should listen to that album after you're done with this episode. And then tomorrow, when this episode goes out, you should all go to Bandcamp and all the other things and listen to Proof of Concept by Madeline Maye, the debut EP from Madeline Maye.
It'll be out Friday, the day after this episode comes out. Given Cuddlepunk the all exclusive access to what I'm sure is going to be the song of the summer.
The song of the summer, Cassie by Madeline Maye. Wouldn't we all be so hopeful? Madeline, thank you so much for being my friend. And thank you so much for being on this episode of the Cuddlepunk Podcast. Where can we find you?
I am honored. Thank you. You can find me on Twitter at Friendly Catwife. You can find me on YouTube at Madeline Maye. I've got a Patreon there, Madeline Maye and you can find me on Bandcamp, also Madeline Maye. Basically, if you put Madeline Maye or Friendly Catwife into a search engine, you'll find me somewhere. I'm on TikTok too. Oh, I'm on porn. Go to the porn site. I'm on porn.
Go to the one about fans. The one about fans.
The one about fans. What about fans? Go to the OF, and I'm there. Friendlier Catwife. You can see me naked and stuff for money.
Go see all of Madeline's corn and all of the wonderful things that she has available on all the other things. You can find links to all of that in the description of this video. You can also find my link tree in the description of this video, which will take you to not only video and audio versions of the podcast you're listening to right now, but also all of my social media, especially my TikTok and my Instagram, which I've been posting on a lot more recently. You guys should all go over there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Cuddlepunk Podcast. If you like this and you want to help support, you can please leave a like on the video, comment down below, comment your rankings of all of the songs on In the Airplane Over the Sea, or just your favorite Neutral Milk Hotel song. Please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and all the other audio platforms. If you like this and you want to help support the show even, you can go over to patreon.com/the Cuddlepunk Podcast, where you can pledge either $3 or $5 a month and get some really cool stuff. The theme song for the Cuddlepunk Podcast is Lose a Turn by Modify. You can find links to all of her stuff in the description. The logo for the Cuddlepunk Podcast is done by Lauren Young. You can find her Instagram in the description down below. Madeline Maye, my dear friend, thank you so much for being on this episode.
Thank you. Love you, girl.
Love you too.